What is an efficient cause? An efficient cause is an agent that initiates or sustains the change from potentiality to actuality. An agent that initiates or sustains the change from potentiality to actuality. For example, I am potentially warm. If a fire was lit there, I would actually be warm. The fire is the agent which brings about me being warm. The fire is the efficient cause of me being warm. Yeah? Another example. Before I was born, I potentially existed. Potentially. My parents brought about my existence. Therefore, my parents are the efficient cause of my existence. The efficient cause of a tree is the seed of the tree, because the seed is the agent that initiates the potential of there being a tree to there actually being a tree. In other words, the efficient cause is the agent which produces the effect. Does that make sense? Any other examples that people can think of?
Is there another way to express efficient cause?
The efficient cause is the cause which, because there are different kinds of causes, but when people usually say the word cause, they mean the efficient cause. For example, the doctor is the efficient cause of my health in the sense that he brings about my health. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So it's the agent that brings about the change. Okay? Second thing we need to establish. A thing cannot be its own efficient cause. A thing cannot be its own efficient cause. In other words, a thing cannot bring itself into existence. Impossible. There are two proofs for this. One is a proof by induction, which is not watertight, but it's good enough, usually. But the second proof is by argument a priori, the facts and logics proof. All right, what do I mean by proof of induction? Let's say we had the proposition, iron conducts electricity. You take iron, you try and conduct electricity, and you see, hey, it conducts electricity. Then you take another piece of iron, then another, and every time you find that the iron conducts electricity. Now, usually we'd reach a point in which we'd say, yeah, iron conducts electricity. We haven't found an example where this doesn't hold, therefore it's true. The counter argument to this is, but how do you know there's not like another piece of iron, that you haven't tested that doesn't conduct electricity? And if that's all we have going for us, that every time we put electricity through iron, it conducts, that kind of holds. I mean, how do we know there's not some other factor that was involved? Maybe iron always has a bit of oxidization, and it's actually the oxidization which conducts electricity. I don't know. But usually in life, the proof by induction is how we reach probable things. Like if every time you come to the Christmas dinner, we have an argument, but every time you don't, we don't. You're probably the cause of the argument. It's not proof, but it's pretty reasonable to say. But we want something better. We want the argument a priori, That is the logical argument. Okay. Okay. If something, let's use the tree as an example. Let's take a tree that exists. We're asking, okay, what caused its existence? What is the agent that brought about its existence? Now, if we say that the tree brought about its existence, then the tree already existed. So how could it bring about its own existence? Because it already existed. A cause is necessarily prior to the effect. Therefore, the thing can't be the cause because you can't be prior and exist. If I'm prior to my own existence, then I can't also exist, because then I'm not prior to my existence. I exist. In other words, if I am the cause of my existence, then I brought myself into existence. But then I existed. So how do I bring myself into existence? Because bringing yourself into existence implies a potentiality which is actualized. But if I was the cause, I was already actualized. I already existed. There's not a potential of me existing because I existed already.
Is this a refutation for evolution?
Kind of. Does that make sense? You have to kind of think about it. Okay, here's one objection to this. I'll do a different character. Yeah, so like, but some atomic particles though, like, we don't know how that happens, you know. Okay, yeah. So we've heard this one that, like, you know, on the subatomic level, you know, the quarks just poof and then poof away, poof poof. Oh, there doesn't seem to be any cause. Right, big problems. Problem number one is when has anyone actually observed this? Scientists kind of they see things and they make these guesses, they make these accounts, but can you actually observe this happening? No. So we don't know. The scientists themselves don't know how some subatomic particles really work. They change their minds, they create new theories, so they don't know. So you can't take something which is unsure to prove something which is sure. Okay? Subatomic particles is a world which we're unsure about. Okay? So you can't take unsure things to try and prove things. You have to take sure things to prove unsure things. So that would be a very weak foundation of an argument. Third of all, we'll get onto this, but the cause I'm talking about isn't necessarily in time. Something can cause something else's existence, but not be prior to it in time. We'll get onto that, but I just remember watching one of these YouTube videos, and they're kind of like, yeah, we don't know why these like subatomic particles come in and out of existence, but we kind of see that like when this happens, that also happens, even though they happen at the same time. So let's say this is true. Let's say this world of physics is true. And by the way, the whole theory of atoms is, like, I think very philosophically dubious. Anyway, but even if, let's say, two subatomic particles exist at the same time, that doesn't mean that one didn't cause the other, strictly speaking. Also, you're taking the scientist's authority. So we're not even doing philosophy. You're basically taking the authority of a scientist that tells you how things are, but you don't actually know that. They might be wrong. You don't know. So the whole subatomic particles thing is just, you're taking something which is unsure, trust of scientists, they don't even know, they're probably wrong anyway. But that perhaps, if all we had was the induction proof, that every time we see something, it's not the cause of its own existence, maybe the subatomic particles would be a counterexample. But because we've made the a priori argument, the facts and logic argument, where we've shown it's actually logically unsound, we know it's impossible. So the subatomic thing is a waste of time. This is another objection. It's Hume's objection. Now, Hume is a modern philosopher, so he's not a philosopher. And Hume said causes don't exist. Hume said, okay, when we see the snooker, the cue ball hit the red ball, and we see the red ball move, it's not that the cue ball caused the red ball to move. We just see the white ball move in one direction, and then we see the red ball move in that direction, and that's what happens all the time. But we don't see the cause. We don't know that the cue ball is the cause. How do you know tomorrow it won't happen like that? How do you know tomorrow the sun won't rise? You know, the sun rises every day, but how do you know it won't rise tomorrow? It's that kind of logic. It's just mental gymnastics. Don't worry about it if you haven't heard it already. I just thought I'd address it because you might hear it in the future. It's fundamentally dishonest because everyone in life acts as though there are causes. And I've put this into verse. Prithee, I ask thee, dear friend of Hume, if the shower don't work, do you assume that it broke down by chance, or do you instead go and find out the cause which made it inept? So in life, thank you. In life, you know, if the computer breaks down, you don't say, things just break down, there's no cause, there's no reason why. No, there's something went wrong. You know, maybe the computer went too hot, the electrical is old, electrical arguments, I don't know. But there's a cause, an electrician can fix it. So it is fundamentally dishonest, and it's rubbish. Okay, let's sum up where we are. We've established what efficient causes are, and we've established that a thing cannot be its own efficient cause. So I'll read the language of Aquinas up to the point we've got to. The second way is from the nature of the efficient cause. In the world of sense, we find there is an order of efficient causes. In the world of sense, because it's from observation, that there is an order of efficient causes because the seed causes the tree, but the seed was caused by the previous tree, which was caused by the seed. So we see that there's an order. In the world of sense, we find there is an order of efficient causes. There is no case known, induction, neither is it indeed possible, a priori, in which a thing is found to be the efficient cause of itself, for so it would be prior to itself, which is impossible. All right. It's really important this foundation is secure and understood. So at this point, does anyone have any questions or any counter-examples or counter-arguments? Yeah.
How do you distinguish between like the nature and character or something? Like I would say that a man and a boy are, I would say they're different in that the boy ultimately is the cause of the man, even though they're the same.
The boy, okay. Me in 2002, I'm a man potentially. I don't actually exist, but potentially I exist. Me in 2008, I exist more than I existed in 2002. So there's a sense in which I actually existed. But I still only potentially exist in respect to the finality of my existence. So my finality is me as a mature man, me in the fullness of being a man. So as a boy, it's an actuality of my final actuality, but which hasn't been completely fulfilled. That to understand this is more philosophy, but does that kind of make sense? So as a boy is an incomplete man. Yeah? All right. Okay. The next point we need to make is as follows. This order, a cause had a cause, the effect had the cause, which had a cause, which had a cause, which had a cause, and so on. This order of efficient causes has something at the beginning. That's all. So far, that's all we're trying to say. It has something at the beginning. At this point, I'm going to bring in the ridiculous theory of the Big Bang. In particular, the theory of the Big Bang in which there was nothing, and poof, something came into existence. This is completely philosophically unsound, and it becomes clear when we actually appreciate what we mean by nothing. Nothing is a state of non-being. Nothing isn't and is something. Nothing is a complete absence of being. It doesn't actually have a being itself. It doesn't have any sense of being. It isn't anything. When we say something is nothing, it's just a complete absence of being. Nothing isn't a thing itself, because if it was a thing itself, it would be something. If nothing was a thing itself, it would be something, but it's nothing. Therefore, something cannot come from nothing. If you have a complete absence of being, a state of non-being, something doesn't just poof into existence. That's against reason, it's against experience. It's just a pure, you're just saying words now which have no meaning to hold that. However, we find that there are things. There is something around us. And therefore, there must be something at the beginning. Because if there are things now, and something cannot come from nothing, therefore, there always was something. I'll expand on this point, and I think if through what we mean by create, or creation, we've got there, we kind of understand this. So when a human creates something, he doesn't create something from nothing. Take a painting. Let's say we'd say I paint a picture, but we could say I created a work of art. But I already have the canvas. I already have the paintbrush. I already have myself. I already have the paint. All these things exist. All the artist is doing is rearranging the matter. The paint is now on the canvas in a certain order, but the canvas was there, the paint was there, I was there. Okay? I'm not actually creating something out of nothing. I am reordering things. I am refashioning. When a human creates, he refashions, really. Okay. So hopefully, when we say we create things, we don't actually like there's just nothing, and we create from nothing. We create from something. Even with children, there is something in you, and from which has the potential of life. But the life doesn't come from nothing. It comes from something. Okay, so there wasn't nothing at the beginning is just false. And while we're at it, but we'll get onto it later, philosophically, we can hold that matter may be eternal, that there was never a beginning of matter, nor was there a beginning in time. I'm 95% sure that the creation of the world, in the sense that we know it in the Catholic way, is something revealed by faith. Aristotle had an argument for God, and his argument assumed that things always existed. But at this point, I just want to say that there was always something from a beginning or just always without a beginning. But there was something, not nothing. Does that make sense? Sure? Okay. Next step. There is a first cause. There is a first cause in the order of efficient causes. For if there isn't a first cause, there can't be an effect, and yet we see effects. Let's unpack this. When we were speaking about efficient causes before, we say the seed is the cause, the apple seed is the cause of the apple tree. We've got to understand cause in a limited way. There's a massive asterisk when we say the seed is the cause of the tree. There are some T's and C's, because the seed itself was caused by something else. So to understand what the cause of the tree is, we can't simply say the seed caused it. End of discussion. That's incomplete, because it begs the question, what caused the seed? And so these causes, the seed, the tree before it, we can call them instrumental causes. We may call them intermediate causes. But our understanding of the effects cannot only resort to intermediate causes. These intermediate causes do not possess their power of causing independently. Their power to cause things is not a power which comes from itself. Rather, it is a power they transmit which they have received. The power which a seed has, the potentiality a seed has into becoming a tree, isn't a power the seed just has from itself, but it's a power it received from the tree before it. Therefore, if every intermediate cause only has a borrowed causal power, it doesn't own it, it took it from something else, it's borrowed. If every intermediate cause only has a borrowed causal power, then, I can't read my handwriting, then without a non-borrowed source, nothing would occur. And this is really the crux of the argument. All these things have the borrowed power to cause. But if there isn't something which actually has the power, which isn't borrowed, then there would be no borrowed power to cause. Nothing would occur. Don't worry, I'll use some images to help illustrate this. So to sum up, an effect needs a cause, but without a cause which possesses its power independently, we do not really have a cause in the full sense. We do not have a true cause. Moreover, this problem isn't solved by positing an infinite number of instrumental causes. We cannot just go back and back. We cannot just go back and back and back. We cannot keep begging the question. We cannot keep going back, the seed caused the tree, caused the seed, caused the tree. Even to infinity, even if there was no beginning in time, we still haven't got a cause in the true sense. Doesn't matter who brought up evolution before. Here we have it. The evolution tries to do a similar thing. How does a human become a human from a monkey? You just add millions of years and it all makes sense, right? You just add millions of years, poof. That's kind of here what the infinite regress is. No, we just haven't, it had no beginning. We have an infinite amount of causes, and that explains it. No, it doesn't. We can put this in verse. If A plus B does not make C. I do not see how there could be a change to this eternal fact, despite millennia protract. There you go. Okay, so there must be a first cause, otherwise we wouldn't have effects. And just an infinite regress isn't an explanation on its own. I'm going to illustrate this through examples, but I need to say another thing. This first cause doesn't have to be prior in respect to time. It doesn't have to be prior in respect to time. Have a look at this painting on the wall. The painting is held up by the nail. Yeah? Now, for the sake of argument, imagine that painting has been on the wall without a beginning. It's always been on the wall. Still, the nail is prior to the painting. Still, the nail causes the painting to hang up, even if the painting has been there forever. Now, I know in reality, a human has to hammer it in, so the nail was obviously there before. But as someone put it, you need to use your intellect more than your imagination here. It's hard to imagine how, if the universe has no beginning, how can there be a cause which is outside this order of causes? But I hope with this example of the picture, you can kind of begin to get a grasp. Here are some images which I think will really tie it all together. Image number 1. Imagine a flower pot which is hanging above you. You see that the flower pot is held up by a link in a chain, right? Which is held up by another link, another link. You see a chain, right? The flower pot's held up by the chain. But you cast your eyes upwards, and you go up and up and up and up, and you look up into the sky, and you see this chain going past beyond the point of vision. And you say, aha, I knew skyhooks existed. No, yes, but you can see how we see the flower pot is hanging up. This corresponds to an effect we see. We see that there's a cause to it. The immediate cause is the chain, the link, the specific link holding the flower point up. That's like the seed before the tree we see outside. And we see that there's another link, the tree before, and the seed, and the tree. But there must be something outside the link of change, the link of the links of the chain, which holds the chain up. Otherwise, the chain would fall. The flower pot would fall. Yeah? There's no use going up to infinity. Even if the links of chains went up and up and up and up, the flower pot would still fall unless you had a skyhook. Or unless you had let's say the force kind of holding the chain up even if it didn't touch it. There must be something outside the links in the chain holding the chain up. Another example. Why are you at the Windsor Castle today? Well, since most of you are sheep, you're probably at the Windsor Castle because a friend told you about it. All right. Let's ask that friend, why are you at the Windsor Castle? Oh, because another friend told me about it. Okay. Now, if each friend at the Windsor Castle was at the Windsor Castle because their broski told them about it, why is everyone at the Windsor Castle? It doesn't make sense. There needs to be something outside the chain of the people which grounds the reason why you're at the Windsor Castle. Yeah? Namely, a fantastic talk is being held. Here's another example. Let's return to our painting. Okay, from the perspective of the painting, yeah? The paint caused the painting. Take it back, the brush. Take it back, the arm. But we see that the paint was moved by the brush was moved by the arm. This is like the non-independent causal power, the borrowed causal power. The power that the paint had to cause was borrowed from the brush, which was borrowed from the arm. But it only makes sense because there was a human which was the source of the causation, that has the power to cause in his own power. Yeah? The power which the brush, the paint had, the source was the human. It's a non-instrumental cause. A final example is the handing down of the faith. Where did you get the Catholic faith from? From my dad. Who got it from the bishop? Who got it handed down from the bishop? Great. But where did the bishop get it from? We know, in this case, we know it's from our Lord. There was a source, an origin, which wasn't part of the chain itself, wasn't part of the intermediate order of causation itself. We're really close to the end here. I'm going to summarize. If there is no cause, the cause of which has the power of causation from itself, there can be no effect. There are effects, therefore there is a cause. This cause cannot just be an intermediate cause because it doesn't explain the effect. Even if the universe was eternal, even if there was no beginning to time, nevertheless, this cause of the order of causation, of efficient causation, must be something outside the material things we see. For all the material things we see have the property that they do not cause themselves. So this thing must be something which is outside the rule, in which it possesses causal power independently. And even if the universe was eternal, it simply would just need to be outside the universe. And this is what we call God. In terms of time, God is outside of time because time is the measure of change. There's a proof for that. We'll leave it. But God experiences time as a now. Yeah, always as now. Every point of time is just now to God. Because God is outside of time. So if you can kind of apply your intellect, even if time had no beginning, God is outside the whole framework. And so he can still be prior, he can still be a cause of the causes we see in the universe. And it's a sobering thought, because that means it's impossible to surprise God. Okay. So the first cause is God. For all we mean when we say God is that he is the first cause of things. He is an efficient cause which has the power of causation himself. He is the cause of himself. And this is why when the likes of Christopher Hitchens say, well, who calls God? They've missed the point. The very definition of God, maybe not definition, but the very nature of God, the understanding of who God is that he is the cause of himself. That's what makes him God. And just before my conclusion, does anyone have any questions so far? Yeah.
You said earlier, and again, context matters with everything, but you said earlier, think on cause itself. But I know you just said that very fact that God causes himself is God. So I suppose there's a question of distinctions. So to be precise with the understanding of, because that's obviously something that, okay, one magical thing that can cause itself. But would you say another thing is contingent on is, okay, it's caused itself, but again, it's outside of time thing. It doesn't, God cause himself, but also doesn't have a beginning. Which something you can't comprehend, whereas the whole, something needs a cause outside of itself, something that has a beginning and defined end. Something that has a beginning must have its cause. Is that whole thing you said you can't, the whole thing of being about being prior?
Yeah.
Because then you exist prior to your existence, which is absurd.
Yeah, I didn't stress this enough. What I said about existence and you can't be prior to its own existence is something which holds true of the things observable in sense, in our senses. Material things have this characteristic. But in fact, each material thing always has a beginning. Because even when the universe might be eternal, there might be a chain of causes, but it's not like a tree can be eternal or a chair can be eternal. Things always deteriorate. Things always change. There's nothing anyone can say that we know that was there from the beginning. So God is outside the chain. God doesn't have the characteristics of the things in the chain. So God is in a category unto himself, but his existence isn't something we're making up. It is the solution we're bound to accept from drawing what we see to the premise. Hopefully that helps you. But this actually gets into what is God. And now I will use scripture. Saying that God exists is a little misleading. For the very word existence, in the word there's the implication that its being, the fact that it exists, comes from something. It's X from something. If your girlfriend's your ex, you've come from your girlfriend. You've left your girlfriend behind. Yeah. So X means out of, like extraterrestrial. Yeah. Out of the terror, out of the earth. So we exist because our existence comes from something, and that's the point I made. Everything always has an efficient cause. But that's why God is. God simply is. He is being. When Moses asks the burning bush, speaks to the burning bush and says, but what, and the burning bush says, well, I don't want to get this wrong. Anyway, he says, who are you? Who should I say you are? And God says, I am who am. Being is who God is. God is. God isn't something, he just is. This is what our Lord said to the Jews when he said, before Abraham was, I am. He was identifying himself as I don't want to say the person, as God who spoke in the burning bush to Moses. That's why they tried to stone him after. So when the Muslims say, no, in the Bible, they don't speak like that. They say, yeah, in the Bible, yeah, Jesus never said he was God though. You're making that up. Big man things. Well, why did the Jews why did the Jews try stone him? Because he didn't blaspheme? Because he didn't identify himself with God? And I think I'm going to tie this all together with a point which links with Theo's introduction. Nowadays, people are nihilistic. Life has no meaning. But it's because they think they came from nothing. But what I have shown and hopefully proved in a way that even if you wanted to disagree, you couldn't, except with malice, is that prior to every created thing was being itself, the fullness of being. If nothing can have an opposite, if nihilism can have the opposite, it's the philosophy which acknowledges this truth and lives according to it. It's the opposite of nothingness, nihilism, existentialism, and fulfillment. Everything meaning, the fullness of life. So I want to encourage you all to try and pursue philosophy. St. Thomas says philosophy is an antidote to sadness, because because man is naturally made for truth, the apprehension to truth is naturally pleasing and satisfying. Philosophy is a very pleasurable activity. The reason it isn't pleasurable is either because any philosophy you've been to is bad philosophy, or just because when you start anything, it's hard. And when it's hard, it's not pleasing. Also, philosophy is the most continuous activity. Leaving theology to the side just for the second, it's the most continuous activity. Sports, you get tired. Activities, you get tired. But thought, you can go a really long time. I mean, you can think the whole morning. You know, breakfast to lunch. It's possible to just think. Can you run for that long? You know, it's the most self-sufficient activity. And so, to pursue this, I want to give a few ideas. First of all, there's a talk on happiness on the LFSPN channel, which I'd warmly recommend. There's a book by Father Fahey, who you might know because of what he says on the you-know-whos, but he also wrote a book called On Mental Prayer, or St. Thomas on Mental Prayer, and he introduces lots of philosophical principles in it. I would recommend it. There's a book called Tour of the Summa by Monsignor Glenn, which is highly recommended. There's a book called, I think it's just My Summa, the same company that published My Imitation of Christ, the small blue book. I think they're called The Confraternity of the Precious Blood. They also published this book, which is like the Summa in shorthand. Very, very, very good. Father Ripperger's videos on YouTube, when he speaks about Aquinas, I've never spotted a mistake. I recommend them. However, I would lean towards away videos, because with videos you're naturally receiving. You're naturally letting the images pass before your eyes. But you know, in a talk like this, you have to really think. And when you're reading, you have to really think. And only in that way do you really get to the bottom of philosophy. And there are also philosophy classes at the London Oratory, which I can recommend. The gentleman who runs it taught this argument to me, so if this was any good, that would be much better. So I would recommend attending those. All right. Any questions?
Could you restate the whole argument?
Yeah, I forgot to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh no. Uh-oh. The second way, the second proof of God, is from the nature of the efficient cause. In the world of sense, we find there is order. We find there is an order of efficient causes. There is no case known, neither is it indeed possible, in which a thing is found to be the efficient cause of itself. For so it would be prior to itself, which is impossible. Now, in efficient causes, it is not possible to go on to infinity, because in all efficient causes following in order, the first is the cause of the intermediate cause, and the intermediate is the cause of the ultimate cause, whether the intermediate cause be several or only one. Now, to take away the cause is to take away the effect. Therefore, if there be no first cause among efficient causes, there will be no ultimate nor any intermediate cause. But if in efficient causes it is possible to go on to infinity, there will be no first efficient cause. Neither will there be an ultimate effect, nor any intermediate efficient causes, all of which is plainly false. Therefore, it is necessary to admit a first efficient cause, to which everyone gives the name of God. Aquinas. Yeah.
Could we perhaps, maybe if there's a group chat or something, come up with a way of phrasing that even a 10-year-old could understand it without the technical language, so that if you do meet an atheist on the train, you can just deliver the syllogism.
I mean, this is an opinion, I might be wrong, but I actually would tend away from that sort of thinking.
Okay.
I think it's better to really get the person to understand what they mean by efficient cause, going on for infinity, prior, posterior, actuality, potentiality, etc. And when they understand those things, then the proof kind of writes itself. Because if we don't really double down on the ideas, I think the proof will only sound reasonable. It might sound convincing, but it won't have that force, which you can only have if you do something like what I've tried to do today. But there definitely have been, and this, I think, with Thomism in the 1900s, there was kind of this movement of the kind of dumbing down, using the language of the man on the street. And I think the language of the man on the street is important. In fact, philosophical language actually uses the language of the man on the street, essentially, potentially very similar. But when we lose the terms, I think we necessarily lose some of the clarity and the precision which is necessary. And ultimately, there is no shortcut. It doesn't take that long. But with the atheists, they're not willing to really think about it anyway. That's the problem. But if I were to give this talk in 5 years' time, I'd probably explain it a bit differently, for sure. Yeah.
So I second that, because if you want more people to understand, so not everybody's got your mental capability, you need to explain it. I keep saying the grandma, you can explain to your grandma that you say it's the same principle.
Yes.
And I think if you want more people to understand, your duty is to make it simple in a way they can understand.
Yeah, in principle, that's correct. And this is why the Church Fathers speak of priests as their job is to break the bread of doctrine. St. Paul talks about people who are new to Catholicism, they can't read the Summa. That's like a baby trying to eat bread. A baby can't eat bread, but a baby can drink milk. Yeah? So the easy explanation is like the baby drinking milk. You know, adapt the explanation to the person, to your listener. And in principle, that's true. You should always adapt the explanation to the listener.
But you yourself have to understand it on the deeper level.
You yourself have to understand on the deeper level. I think ultimately, but don't forget, this is why God came down and became man, to teach man the truth. Because, I mean, a teacher, Aquinas, it's been explained to me in person, has explained this to me. I accept it because it's true. But I probably wouldn't have got to it on my own. Yeah? But that's why God came down to teach us the truth. Because there are some things that just require thought and take a lot of time. And so I would say that St. Thomas says maybe not everyone is capable of understanding the proof, but they can still accept the Catholic faith, and they can still save their soul, and they can still know God exists, but from above, because God said so through the Catholic Church. There'll be a talk on this next month. I mean, I have as much as possible tried to break it down. If I had 5, this was explained to me not in an hour, I'd say over 4 hours. 3 hours, 4 hours. So this could have been broken down more. I could have given more examples. I think it would have been difficult for me to break it down in simpler language than I did without losing the force of the argument.
Sorry, could you please repeat your reading list for philosophy?
For sure. Talk on happiness in the LFSPN. There are philosophy classes at the Brompton Oratory once every 2 weeks on a Wednesday. They're really good. Father Fahey on mental prayer. Glenn's tour of the Summa. I think the book's called My Summa. It's released by the Confraternity of the Precious Blood. Father Ripage's videos on YouTube on Aquinas are good, but also recommendations. There's nothing that beats a recommendation from someone who knows. Take someone who knows it, and they'll tell you, yeah, that book's not so good. You want to read that book. And there's nothing better than that, really. In fact, I'd lean away towards Walk into Wetherspoons. Oh, look at the book on God. I'll take it. I wouldn't buy books on philosophy if they haven't received a recommendation. But once you've read one good book and you've said, yeah, this is good, and then that author usually recommends books at the back, and then you kind of think, oh yeah, this author went to the same school as that author, and these guys are talking to each other, and you over time develop like the world of good people. Like Father Fahey, good. Holy Ghost Father. Archbishop Lefebvre actually went to the same place. Huh, interesting. Yeah. Anything else? Good. So does anyone want to give an example of repeating that to everyone? No, I'm joking. Thank you very much.